Hi, everybody. My name is 𝙈𝙘𝙀𝙀𝙀, and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop with just 𝙈𝙘𝙀𝙀𝙀. I'm flying solo again today, but this will be the last podcast on my own. Phelim will be back next week. And you'll forgive his absence when you find out what he's been up to. It is week 107 of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown, by the way. I need to not forget to say that. But even though I don't have Phelim, I have Magda here to keep me on the straight and narrow. And because Phelim is in Ireland, we won't be celebrating his birthday. So his birthday is actually when we're taping today. So he's working away and we're going to see him soon. But later we're going to be talking to our very dear friend, Robert Bryce, about the Biden administration's efforts to push through their climate agenda by bypassing Congress. And we're also going to look at the real costs of the pandemic, which are just being discovered by the Pulitzer Prize winning journalists at the LA Times and the New York Times. God forgive them. And we don't have a recipe today, but I am introducing a new feature on the podcast, which I'm calling right now, but we might change the name. But for right now, I'm going to call it I'm a Freedom Lover, Get Me Out of Here, which will feature interviews with people who have moved out of blue states, out of leftist dominated states into red, freer places. So we're going to begin right now by going over to our dear friend Robert Bryce and listening to what he has to say about the new regulations out of the Securities and Exchange Commission and many, many other things. So we go over to that now. So now we're joined by our dear, dear friend, Robert Bryce, who is, as I was writing this over the weekend, Robert, and realizing your bio gets longer every day. He is a podcaster, he is an author, he is a documentary filmmaker, he is an energy expert, and that's why I have him on today. Thank you for joining me, Robert.
Happy to be with you. And now careful on that expert line. My dad said an expert's from anybody from out of town. So I don't know.
Well, actually, funny enough, I looked at it this morning and I thought, I wish I could find a different word to use for you, because the word expert has been destroyed, actually, particularly with COVID. I think the word expert has been completely destroyed, but we'll get on to that.
Sure.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I mean, I didn't think the world could get crazier, and boy, was I ever wrong.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And one of the things I was going to ask you about first, before we get into talking about the SEC, was we've started a new feature in our podcast where we're talking to people who have left blue states to go to red states. And I thought I would start by asking you, how are you enjoying all the Californians that are moving to Austin?
Oh, my Lord. It's just unbelievable. My son, he's our youngest, Jacob. He's now 22. He was selling shoes. He worked in a shoe store for a little while. I didn't like it, but I said, well, so where are all these people coming from? And he said, Dad, they all come from Dallas or California. Okay. And it's like, but it's true. And the city is, Lauren and I have lived in Austin for 37 years. It's unbelievable how many people are moving here from California. But look at what's happening. I mean, last year alone, electricity prices in California went up, residential rates went up almost 12%. I mean, the cost of living there is going toward the moon, and energy prices are a big part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just talked to somebody who has literally moved. She's just moved from California to Utah. And she talked exactly about that. She said that her monthly energy bill was something like, I think, was it right, Magda? $1,500. $1,500. She's in Utah. She's paying $60, she says. Yeah. $60 and change, basically, for the same and for a larger home, I think. But I wanted to ask you, let's move on from that. I wanted to ask you about this news from the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the Biden administration have found a new and innovative way of forcing their climate agenda on us. Tell us what the Securities and Exchange Commission are proposing and what it would mean.
Sure. Now, I will be clear. I haven't read every page but the gist of this is of a piece with all of the rest of this, mess of climate and energy related policy that's being pushed by the Biden administration. And it's that through the SEC that investors and companies will have to, report their climate related risk. The key here, Ann, I think, is that this is just the latest example of the Biden administration just going off with no kind of sensibility about what is happening in the world especially after February 24th, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's as though there's no history exists. But a brief vignette. I was in Dallas a few weeks ago, ran into some family members, and they work in the foreign policy area. They're working for the federal government, and I asked them about Biden and what their energy policy was, the energy policy of the Biden administration. They said, yeah, they have a lot of tactics, but no strategy.
Yeah.
I thought,
yeah.
That's it exactly. And it's a devastating comment. But when you look at the FERC, when you look at the Keystone XL pipeline cancellation, when you look at this endless talk about electric vehicles and the rest of it with no discussion about China or Chinese minerals, metals, rare earth elements, they have all these things that they're doing, but there is no sensibility that makes any sense as a whole, that particularly in a world where after the invasion of Ukraine, the world is desperate for hydrocarbons of all kinds.
Yeah. And the solution that the environmentalists have is, this is a great opportunity to segue away from fossil fuels. Like, they literally are saying that, which proves that they definitely aren't experts. Whatever they're experts on, they're not experts on energy. That's for sure.
Well, look at what I just looked up the numbers. So today at TTF, which is the Dutch trading hub, which is the European equivalent of our Henry hub here in the United States, which is the trading hub in Louisiana. The price today is $36 per million BTUs. $36 per million BTUs. Here in the U.S., it's less than $6. So what are the Europeans going to have to do? I mean, and this is just flat and just obvious. They're going to have to start drilling for oil and gas, and they're going to have to get with it right damn quick. Yeah. And this is clear. And yet I've been saying the same thing for months. Yes. I testified before the Senate in Joe Manchin's committee last November. What did Europe do? They overinvested in renewables, underinvested in hydrocarbons, closed baseload plants, and depended too much on imports. Mm-hmm. And this is exactly the same policy that is being pushed by the climatistas in the United States. That, climate is their only issue. Well, no, it's not. Climate change is a concern. It's not our only concern. And we need to be focused on energy security and affordability. And that is not any part, in my view, of what the Biden administration is proposing.
Yeah, well, if you think about particularly, and we've talked about this before with you, but where you're sitting there in Austin, where in Texas, like the center of energy in the world, to most people's minds, people froze to death because of the environmental agenda and over-reliance on renewables. If it can happen in Texas, it can happen anywhere.
Texas is following the California model, and it's a broken model. And as I wrote in the Dallas Morning News last year, this is a government failure. The policymakers did not understand the fragility of the electric grid, and they were sold on this idea, it's we'll just make a market of it. No. Yeah. You don't mess with the electric grid. It's the most important energy network in our society, and yet they've allowed this huge amount of influx of renewables just in the same way the California market has done. And now our grid is increasingly fragile in the same way California's is, it's truly remarkable. Two states that are completely different in terms of politics, but that they have followed this same idea of, we'll just let the market decide. Well, no, there's some things you can't leave to the market. And this in the electric grid is one of them.
Yeah, but the market, this isn't a free market in a sense, because of the fact that, because we believe in markets and we believe in free markets. However, what's happened is that the market has been skewed and prejudiced in favor of renewables. And so in a supposedly free market situation, utility companies are obviously going to buy into renewables because of all these subsidies, right? Am I getting that right?
Of course. You have the tax credits that are worth, in the case of wind, as much as $25 a megawatt hour. And remember, in the Build Back Better Act, there was a push to put an extension in the Build Back Better Act that would have kept that in place for another 10 years. So you're exactly right that these tax credits, subsidies, they're driving investment that is skewing the marketplace and therefore reducing the economic viability of the thermal power plants that we have to have. Because we could cover Texas or California with wind turbines. We can't make the wind blow. Yeah.
No, that's definitely a problem. I want to a couple of things I want to touch on. I want to also think just and ask you about this decision that the Biden administration have, their decision of how to cope with the gas prices by releasing some of the strategic reserve of oil, a million barrels a day. Is that that's what they're going to do?
I think that's right. Yeah.
So I think America consumes something like 17 million barrels a day. So this is obviously a drop in the ocean. But what are the implications of actually tapping into the reserve? I think this is kind of a very serious move, right?
Well, it is, and I just think it's another example of lots of tactics but no strategy. This is a very temporary fix, as is this idea that we're going to suspend the gasoline tax. Well, where do you make up that revenue? How are you going to refill the SPR then in a few months or a few years? This was supposed to be for wartime. Well, this isn't wartime, and this isn't some major conflict that has upsetted the market. It's a multitude of factors, right? After COVID, more financial discipline from the oil and gas industry because they wasted so much and destroyed so much capital during the shale revolution, Russia, all of these things coming together. But again, what's the long-term plan? And the reality is, like it or not, that if we're going to get through this, we need more production of oil and gas in the United States. Full stop. There is no other answer. Yeah. And the reality is that this renewable mirage, the big renewable lie, which is what we've been hearing over and over from the biggest NGOs and top academics in this country, it's a lie. And all you have to do is look at Europe and see that it was a lie.
It was, and I sent you that article over the weekend from The Atlantic, which I thought was hilarious. Actually, I just thought it was hilarious because basically, obviously they didn't say it, but the article, the summary of the article was basically, environmentalists have been wrong about everything, but obviously they don't say that. But they're, we should be. I mean, I'd love to think that COVID and particularly what's happened with Ukraine would teach the world to be very, very skeptical of experts. But unfortunately, I actually genuinely don't think that that's going to happen. I mean,
you sent me that piece from the New York Times, and the number of times the word expert was used
I know.
in that article, I thought, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the tyranny of the experts. Well, who are these people? Are they really qualified? Let me make one other quick point if I can. And I have a podcast coming out tomorrow with John Hannekamp on Tuesday about his messages. He's a commodities consultant, mainly in the coal industry. He said the big issue now that's looming isn't energy, it's food. And one of the big issues around this idea
fertilizer.
Of renewables is that, we'll just renewables. Well, no. What about natural gas derived fertilizer? And so we're looking at a multi-year situation where inflation and food prices and potential famine are very real. Yeah. And that this is the crisis. And yet you can't make this work without natural gas. You cannot make it without hydrocarbons. And that is the other part of the big lie that, frankly, I'm disgusted with it, Ann. I mean, I really am. That we need energy realism and energy humanism, and we need them right darn now.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, and we will obviously send people links to your podcast because what you're doing is so important. I mean, there's a real dearth of education when it comes to energy and comes to economics. And it's interesting. I was at a dinner actually on Saturday night with a couple of very smart people. And we actually ended up having, that was exactly the conversation we ended up having, was about fertilizer. And it's kind of one of those stories that people aren't talking about because people, I think it reminds me of back in the day when we were doing work on fractionation. And I remember talking to you. I think one of the biggest problems is people don't know where stuff comes from. Right. Like people, you hear the young people talking about electricity, like it's a source of energy, like, it's an electric car, whatever. And in fact, actually on Saturday night, I ended up in a Tesla. And we had a bunch of people in this Tesla, and we were having this argument. And the guy who had the Tesla was basically saying, well, it's electricity. And I can proudly say, that this is all American. Everything's American here. And I said to him, slow down. I said, you need to slow down here because everything about this car is not American because the energy, where's the energy coming from? Where did the oil come from? Where did any of this stuff come from? Are you sure all of this came from America?
And the truth is that it doesn't. And this is the issue that's really worrisome to me. And I've been meaning to write about it. I've just been traveling a little too much. But, what the European experience shows is over-reliance on Russia for hydrocarbons. Yes. What the U.S. is doing now, particularly under the Biden administration with this promotion of EVs and wind turbines, it makes the U.S. completely dependent on the Chinese for high-strength magnets, the neodymium iron boron magnets, and that go into electric vehicles that are the critical ingredient in electric vehicles and in wind turbines. And the DOE just reported in February, China controls, I think it's 92 or 94% of the global marketplace for these magnets.
God, I find it really frightening, by the way, that the leaders, and experts around the world allowed us to get into a situation where we are so dependent on China. I mean, if they decided in the morning, that they're not going to make any more drugs, by the way, again, it's very much the same thing as you've just said there about the magnets. I mean, also China is 97%, 98% of all the drugs for everything that we need, all the drugs for all the essential things that we need are made in China. How did we ever, how could smart people, well, actually, in some ways, only smart people could have done something this stupid, right?
Well, I really, and I say this with no joy, Anne, but I think we've sleepwalked into a similar situation as the Europeans. Mm-hmm. We've sleepwalked into this idea, oh, well, it's a global market and it's going to work out. And I was guilty of this very same thing. But we can just source it, uranium fuel, we can get it from overseas, whatever. No, what we're going to see, and I think it's long overdue, is more retrenchment, and it's going to require more muscular government activity in industrial policy. Yeah. And that's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard sell in Washington, but we need that. And particularly, we need it on the nuclear industry. We need this. We need robust government, bipartisan, decadal-long support, because the Chinese are building 46 nuclear reactors. We're building 2.
Oh God, it's wild. I want to go back for a little minute about the fertilizer, because I just wanted to, if you have any kind of data on that, of how bad the situation is. So fertilizer is made using obviously very dependent on natural gas. Right. Can you give us a kind of a sense of the magnitude of this, if you can at all? Well,
I wish I could give you chapter and verse on the fertilizer front. I was in Indiana a few months ago and talking to a farmer there and he was saying, fertilizer delivered to his farm gate had more than doubled in price. Yeah. And urea the same. Yeah. And he said he couldn't even get a lot of the herbicides that he had been trying to get and just couldn't get them. Yeah. So what does this mean then? It means potentially lower yields. Mm-hmm. Well, but further, one of the interesting things John Hanekamp said is that something like 30% of the grain that is exported out of Ukraine goes to Africa. Well, and now the Ukrainians, they may not be able to plant this year, right? The farmers, because of all the war, there's no planting going on. So it's not just about fertilizer. It's about the growth. Yes. It's about the farming cycle and about the exports out of the port of Mariupol and all of these things coming together that are critical to the global food supply, and fertilizer is a key part of it. But again, to just repeat what I said, you cannot make fertilizer at scale. Remember, before this, we relied on bat guano and bird guano. That was the key fertilizer, and that this was the way the world's farmers made their crops, produce more. Now it's the Haber-Bosch process and natural gas, and that is irreplaceable.
How quickly? So this answers maybe 2 questions. How quickly could production in the United States be ramped up to cope with the demand? How quickly could that happen?
Now, you're talking about fertilizer or energy,
I'm talking about fossil fuel production, by the way, which obviously would then go on to onto natural gas, etc. Sure.
Well, it's a challenge, Anne, because remember, the industry came off of this, growth cycle and, running 1,500 more than something like that. I don't know the exact count of that number of drilling rigs. Now we're at half that number. And we don't have, and one of the big challenges is labor. I've heard this over and over from people in the oil and gas industry that they don't have enough roughnecks, enough tool pushers, enough roustabouts to man all of the equipment that they have. They need qualified truck drivers. All of these things are running into labor shortages, as well as increased prices, and some cases shortages of things like tubular steel products and other things that they need to do their business. So it's a squeeze in nearly every part of the industry, and it's not going to be resolved quickly. You didn't ask this, but the other question is, well, how quickly could the Europeans ramp up?
Yes, I was just thinking about that. Exactly. They would have to decide. I mean, obviously, one of the problems in Europe is that they would have to decide that they would start producing fossil fuels. I mean, in Ireland, for example, I'm sure you probably know this, but I mean, there's an opportunity in Ireland. There's a fracking opportunity in Ireland, and bizarrely, a bit like here, which I just think is almost, my mother used to talk about the hand of God. It's kind of weird because, I remember back in the day when we used to look at that great shale map of where the shale opportunities in the United States were. It was almost weird that it was almost geographically in places that really needed the economic stimulus, like so the Central Valley in California, poorer parts of upstate New York, in places in Ohio and in Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing in Ireland, very bizarre. In Ireland, the big opportunity is in a county called Leitrim, which I don't want to be too flippant, but basically is most famous for producing depression and alcoholism. And they decided, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to go ahead with this. So yes, I mean, obviously there was massive opportunities in Europe, but are they going to do it? Are they going to do it?
But they have to repeal the frack bans first.
Yes. Yeah.
They have to say, no, we got it wrong. And then is there going to be the social acceptability for drill rigs in your neighborhood? And then what about the frack sand trucks? And what about the, all of the truck traffic that's going to be
Well,
required?
this is where, the damage done by misinformation from the likes, particularly of Josh Fox with the documentary Gasland, which was nominated for an Oscar, nominated for whatever, right? Which was full of absolute lies. And it did, and obviously, as we know, the anti-fracking movement in Europe was paid for by Putin. And I'm quoting, obviously, I'm quoting Hillary Clinton here. She's the one who told us that's who paid for all of this anti-fracking information. But
it was money well spent. I mean,
yes.
You look at it from Putin's standpoint, and he set it up and just laid the trap perfectly.
He must be so amused. I actually made the point. I said at this dinner on Saturday night, I said to some of these guys, I said, environmentalists caused the war in Ukraine. And people agreed with me. I mean, it may sound very extreme, but it certainly made it possible. It made it. I mean, if Europe,
it opened the door, and you see and I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago pointing this out, that California has followed the European model almost to a T. Right? Yeah. Closing their baseload plants, over-investing in renewables, under-investing in hydrocarbons, and relying too much on imports. And now their energy costs are going toward the moon. And this is highly regressive. I mean, we can talk about these other things, Ann, but for the poor and the middle class, this is just terrible. I mean, it's just, you add all the other inflationary aspects into this: soaring cost of electricity, soaring cost of motor fuel, soaring cost of food. This is all terrible for them. There's no upside to any of this for them. And yet that is never discussed by the likes of the Sierra Club and the Natural Resources Defense Council and all of these other groups that are getting not tens even, but hundreds of millions of dollars from some of the richest people in America.
Yeah, and actually it makes me
continue pushing their anti-nuclear, anti-hydrocarbon agenda.
It makes me think, when you say that, it makes me think of, there's a moment, I think, in one of your documentaries, there's a really beautiful, powerful moment in one of them where you remind me of where you are, and you were talking to a very, very poor man, talking about his energy prices. Was that in India? Were you in India? Where was that?
Well, I think we might have been in India, where the village was invaded by elephants at night because they didn't have lights. I mean, their personal safety was at risk, not, because the wildlife was just running through the village. Villages with lights didn't have that problem. Yeah. But this is the other big issue, and that we talk about what's happening here in the U.S. and around the world, but we focus on, climate change, and we're going to solve it ourselves, and the rest of the world is going to, follow us. 4 out of 10 people in the world today use less electricity than an average kitchen refrigerator in the United States.
Stop again. I want to stop again. Say that again, because I remember this is something that you've talked about. Your refrigerator, I think is how you put it. Your refrigerator in your house in Austin uses, go on ahead,
1,000 kilowatt hours per year. Now, this is my old refrigerator. I've replaced it since then, but it was using 1,000 kilowatt hours per year. 3.3 billion people, roughly, in the world today are living in places where electricity consumption is less than 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita per year. So this idea of climate change, it's a Western, and the energy transition, rather, this idea about the energy transition, it's a Western conceit. This idea that, we're going to change, we're going to stop climate change mitigation, we have to do all this, spend all this money on, not in a world where you have not just a few million people, but 4 out of 10 people, roughly 3.3 billion people in the world, living in dire electricity poverty. They may be concerned about climate change, but it is not their first concern.
No. And then, again, I mean, I just despair at all these experts talking, and so many governments talking about net zero as a goal to be achieved, and great. I mean, as you say, like, whatever, climate change sometime, whatever. But right now, I mean, the idea that, that is being, and they're putting in these crazy dates at which they're going to achieve this. And I just love to know who is giving them the information that they think that this can be achieved at any level of solar panels or windmills.
Well, and that's just it. And I was just talking to a friend of mine who lives in California, and he and I were talking about the same thing. And his point was, show me the plan. Yeah. Show me where you're going to do this, and do it slowly. And I said, I joked, do it slowly, because I'm from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Give it to me. Let's do it step by step. Explain it to me here now. Yeah.
Go slow. Don't use any big words. but you're not going to read about this in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the National Public. You won't read about it in National Public Radio. And I wrote a piece in Quillette a few weeks ago. Some of this journalism around renewables in rural America, it's some of the worst journalism I've ever seen. I mean, just terrible. I mean, execrable, just awful, where they don't consider any of the concerns of rural people, property values, landscapes, view sheds, noise issues. In fact, it was I think it was on Saturday, the town of Lovell, Maine, a little town, they had a referendum in the town. They voted 80% against a large scale solar project that was slated to be built in their town.
Oh, now you're actually putting a finger on something that I saw over the weekend and thought, God, I must ask Robert about this. Because I went on your website, and again, we're going to put that up in the show notes. We'll put that up on the screen right now. What is your website again, Robert?
RobertBryce.com.
Robert Bryce. And people should go there for all things Robert Bryce. And it'll also give you a portal into where to find the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And everything that Robert has is just fabulous and extremely well researched. But one thing that I saw that you have there, and I thought, oh my God, this is an interesting resource. So you have a database, and please talk me through it. You have a database of local, am I correct in saying local decisions to push back against renewables? Am I expressing that correctly?
Yes, you got it right. So it's the Renewable Rejection Database.
Database, right. Go for it.
I've been collecting it since 2015. And what's fascinating about this, and I've been a reporter my whole career, and I've never had a real job, right? This is what I do.
Yes.
And the wind industry, the solar, never questioned any of the numbers in my database, never challenged any of it. But the punchline is this: since 2015, there have been 325, at minimum, 325 communities from Maine to Hawaii that have rejected or restricted wind projects. The New York Times won't report on this. I spent an hour on a Zoom call with Julia Simon, an NPR reporter, talking her through this. She didn't report any of it, didn't include any of this in her reporting.
Oh, because it wasn't what she wasn't looking for that, Robert.
It's so incredibly dishonest. And what has happened more recently, and I had a piece in Forbes about this just a couple of days ago. Mid-American Energy, one of the biggest utilities in America, sued Madison County, Iowa, to force them to accept more wind turbines. Forced them. And so this is the great green hope. This is the great, environmentally friendly technology. Well, if it's so great, why are you forcing a county? Why are you suing a county to force them to accept it?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yes, the Renewable Rejection Database, I've started building up additional data regarding solar rejections, because what's interesting to me is that, for years it was the wind industry that was facing a lot of friction, but now as big solar is being pushed out, you're seeing a very similar backlash against these large scale solar projects, which will cover hundreds of acres. And the locals are saying, we don't want this.
Yeah, you had God, I could talk to you forever, Robert. I mean, you had a great thing a few years ago, I just remembered, where you had done the math on how much land it would take solar panel wise to power. I can't remember, but I remember my memory was something like you'd have to cover Texas or cover California completely. Give me some sense of that. Scale.
I haven't done the I could do it. I just haven't done it, but I've done the calculations for wind, and I've done it in many of my presentations over the last few months. Yes. But two different sources, one from Harvard and the other from Václav Smil, who's one of the most very highly regarded energy writers. They both calculated that to meet existing electricity demand in the U.S., not to forget about future electric vehicles and electrify everything and the rest of it, but 4,000 terawatt hours per year. With wind turbines, you need a land area twice the size of the state of California. And you can't build wind turbines in California. You live in California. It was just a few weeks ago that the Bureau of Land Management, not a local jurisdiction, the Bureau of Land Management rejected a wind project that was proposed for northwest of Sacramento. So this idea, we're going to set aside all this land, even if it's, we use half wind turbines. Well, that's still one California. Well, why does that matter? Because you can't build wind turbines in California. So, yes. We're just going to put it out there in flyover country. Well, those people out there in flyover country don't want your stuff either.
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
We're living in a dangerous time, Anne, and I don't say that with any relish.
No, I know.
But the level
No, it's not nice being right about everything. I mean, yeah, and
we were right
about,
and you were right in Frack Nation about Putin and the anti-gas push.
Yeah.
But the propaganda, and I think that's the right word, the propaganda that is being promoted by some of the biggest media outlets in this country is dangerous when it comes to the issue of energy. And I would say that the Biden administration is guilty as well. And again, I don't use that word loosely, but what they are doing is propaganda.
No. By the way, I wish, what I wish you'd done, by the way, and maybe do this in the future, when you're being interviewed, I say this to everyone, and I haven't needed to do it myself because the mainstream media don't interview me that often. But I think one of the things that people like ourselves should do is, if someone like that interviews us, we should record the whole thing. And then when they do, release the edited portion, we should release the whole thing and say, it's really weird because she didn't mention, like when you're talking about the NPR journalist, you dropped this incredible story on her, this 325 individual, local areas that had rejected renewables. I mean, that's a story. That's a headline. That's really interesting news. And that's something that journalists, as you said, like journalists should be reporting on this, and the journalism that goes around. And that's why I sent you the piece from the Atlantic, because I just thought the guy writing in the Atlantic, by the way, I looked at his bio and he's like the planet, he writes about the planet for the Atlantic, he's like the planet's expert.
Right.
And, his article was basically, well, we were wrong about everything, but whatever, but he doesn't say they were wrong. He said that the environmental agenda is outdated. And I'm like, that's an interesting phrase to use, outdated. No, it's not outdated. It's wrong. It was wrong a decade ago and 2 decades ago, and it's wrong today, and more wrong, and by the day, as it continues.
And unfortunately, they have the Biden administration is under the thrall of all of this. I mean, look at I've written about this as well recently in Forbes. Look at what is happening at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. This agency is adamantly anti-nuclear. They've made that clear.
Yeah.
I mean, in January, they poured out an application from Oklo Power. They wanted a permit for a 1.5 megawatt reactor. That's a tiny reactor. That happened just a couple of weeks after the Chinese started a high temperature gas reactor in Shandong province, which is cutting edge of cutting edge. And here we are, we can't even get a permit for a tiny reactor.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks later, they rescinded the license extensions that were granted under the Trump administration to 2 nuclear plants, Peach Bottom in Pennsylvania and Turkey Point in Florida. I mean, how we live in a banana republic now where there's no rule of law, and the bureaucrats, once the administration changes, can simply say, oh, never mind, we don't mean it. I mean, if we're serious about reducing emissions, if we're serious about saving landscapes, we need to be adamantly pursuing nuclear hammer and tongs. And yet the Biden administration, in his State of the Union, President Biden did not use the word nuclear one time.
Oh, gosh.
They don't care. They're not interested.
We're coming to the end of this interview. Is there any possibility, Robert, that you could tell us anything, any good news at all? Is there any good news at all out there? I mean, obviously America, the good news in America is that we have all this amazing opportunity. We've all this amazing fossil fuels, including coal, by the way. I think coal has not seen its last days yet. I think
coal use was up 17% last year in the U.S.
Yeah.
The Chinese did.
Oh my God.
300 million tons.
My father used to say, he used to sell home heating products. And I remember he used to always, it's just stayed in my mind. He used to talk about coal, that nothing would heat a house like coal, the power of it, that the power of the energy of it. And of course, it's true, if you put a log fire down, it's all very pretty, it's all great and everything, but there's no great powerful, like you put a coal fire down, you pull your chair back. And we have that sense where because it's got this amazing energy, and I do believe in God, and it's like that coal wasn't there. It's not there accidentally. It's there for us to use for the betterment of mankind. And unfortunately, environmentalists think, leave it in the ground. That's their thing. Leave it in the ground. Leave the coal in the ground. Leave the oil in the ground. Leave the natural gas in the ground. And meanwhile, the people on the surface of the ground will freeze to death.
But meanwhile, they don't say leave the neodymium and the iron and the boron and the dysprosium in the ground. They're assuming that, we're just going to magically produce all of these metals and minerals that are needed for their fantasy land around renewables. I mean, that's why I say it's a dangerous time. But I'm an optimist, and I'm,
Yes,
hopelessly so. I'm
I know you are.
optimistic, as Molly Ivins said, optimistic to the point of idiocy.
I love it.
This is self-correcting. I mean, and what we're going to see in the energy field, I think, is the cure to high. The old saw about the cure to high prices is high prices, and the cure for low prices is low prices. I think, if God willing and the creek don't rise, the November elections are going to be an inflection point in American politics, because
Yes.
I think that the Democratic Party, and they have overreached and they have made so many mistakes, particularly on the energy front, that I think the voters have seen this. And that's why you see all this SPR and talk about gas tax holidays and the rest, because the Democrats are scared out of
Yes.
their minds
Yeah.
about high gasoline prices, because the consumer sits there at the pump and looks at it for 3 full minutes.
Yeah.
Why is this costing me $5?
I was writing notes and questions for you, and I was saying, I was going to say something about, the experience of the consumer buying gas. And I was thinking, take out the word consumer, the voter buying gas, the voter who is buying gas and who's going to remember in November. So November is going to be very interesting. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. I always love to talk to you about these issues, because you were just a fund of knowledge and a great friend to this podcast and to us. And long may it continue. And Magda, of course, is going to be moving into your neck of the woods. So hopefully you'll be catching up with her when she's down there.
Good. Well, always great to see you, and give Phil my regards.
I will. All right. Thanks so much, Robert. Bye. God bless.
I could honestly talk to Robert Bryce forever. I mean, what a fund of knowledge. I mean, he's we are so lucky to be able to phone him up at any time and get him to come on our podcast. We're very, very lucky. And anyone who wants to follow and find out information about energy, all things energy, please do go to Robert Bryce. So it's robertbryce.com is his website. And from the website, you'll find all the other things about him. I wanted to bring you a story, though, right now about... how these, so the New York Times and LA Times, and Robert mentioned a little bit about how awful mainstream media is right now. And, it's really shocking to read now in the LA Times, in the New York Times, among their Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, the fact, these extraordinary news stories that they're breaking at this point. Like, for example, so this is from the LA Times, where they talk about nearly half of LAUSD students, the LAUSD school district, I think I'm correct in saying, is the largest school district in America. So it's a very, very significantly large population of young people there. Nearly half of them have been chronically absent this year. And that's what the LA Times are reporting. This is in 2022. Nearly half of Los Angeles Unified students, more than 200,000 students, have been what's known as chronically absent from school this year, which, and I'm reading from the LA Times, meaning they've missed at least 9% of the academic year, according to the data provided to the LA Times. This is, the connection, by the way, between absenteeism among young people and all kinds of really awful things happening to them in their lives is extremely well established. The idea that this wasn't predictable is beyond me. The idea that during COVID, when all the brilliant experts, as we had a little conversation with Robert about that earlier, about this word experts, and it's interesting, the LA Times in this very article quote an expert, and it's amazing, they get an expert to weigh in on this situation, about this absenteeism. Erica Peterson is the person that they asked to speak to in the interview. Erica Peterson is the National Education Manager for School Innovations and Achievement, a company that works with districts to track and improve attendance, right? This is what she's apparently an expert on, attendance. And here's the quote from Erica. "We thought we were going to go back to normal this year, and it just hasn't happened at all." And she went on, by the way, to say, almost all of the students are 1 full year behind academically as a result of excessive absences. And she goes on to say, it's going to take an awful long time to right the ship. I'll tell you one thing that Erica's an expert on. She's certainly an expert on trite expressions and cliches. But her expertise in relation to absenteeism in schools, this is the class of expert that is being paid enormous sums of money by taxpayers to be really useless at their jobs. The idea that she didn't see this coming when any normal person could have seen this coming because of the disruption. Not the disruption caused by COVID, the disruption caused by the government's idea of how to react to COVID. And one of their big ideas, one of their brilliant ideas, was to close down schools and send children home to learn remotely. And that does not work. And, you know, you really didn't need to be an expert on anything to know that that wouldn't work. But this is like a car wreck in slow motion that we're all going to be watching with these children. And just another paragraph from the story. A statewide analysis in January prepared at the request of the California Department of Education showed that nearly 30% of students in a sample of districts representing more than 320,000. So this is statewide. So first of all, we were looking at LAUSD, but among the whole state of California, more than 320,000 students were chronically absent this school year. 30% of the students were chronically absent. And I think we know, I mean, and it's very obvious that the highest percentage of those children who are absenting themselves from schools are from poorer situations where they don't have the supports that, you know, the rich people will survive all of this because they can bring in tutors, they can take time off work, they can do whatever to survive this. But for poorer families, needing the support of the school and children needing an environment to go to, particularly children out of unsafe homes, to be able to go to a school where there'd be some adult who would care enough about them to notice if they were in trouble, to taking that away from hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students for over a year is unconscionable and had nothing to do with public health and everything to do with labour unions and teachers who didn't want to work. And it's extraordinary. But, you know, we're going to see more and more of these stories going forward. And it's very, very depressing to read. And plenty of people, I know plenty of you listening to this, know of children who have suffered irreparable damage from what's happened. It's just horrific, and we hope and pray that they will survive. But this is a historic and catastrophic disaster, and the COVID wasn't a disaster. It was the reaction to COVID. It was what governments decided to do without doing any kind of cost-benefit analysis or deciding if we do this, what else will happen and what cost will that be in terms of human misery. And they didn't do that. They just decided, to unilaterally decide to just, let's close everything down and send everyone home. And, it doesn't work. And I'm really hoping that maybe people will have learned from that. Now, that's all very depressing. So I want to move away from that as quickly as possible and go to something really delightful. And I don't have a recipe this week. Sorry about that. Missing film, so I don't have my cameraman over the weekend to film me. But honestly, we've been so busy with everything, and you'll understand a lot more about that very, very soon. So I didn't get to do any nice cooking, but I would recommend to you to keep on cooking. And thank you for all the really nice notes that you've sent. We really appreciate it. Please keep them coming. But right now we want to go over to an interview we did a little bit earlier with a very, very lovely friend of ours, Elizabeth Prescott, who moved out of Los Angeles to southern Utah. Let's go over to that now and hear how she got on and why she left LA. So we're now joined by my dear friend, Elizabeth Prescott, who is the first guest in what we're describing, a new section we're describing in our podcast called I'm a Freedom Lover, Get Me Out of Here.
So wonderful to see you. And my only regret in leaving where I left is a small handful of friends who also haven't left yet. I say yet. So I'm from Los Angeles. I'm third generation Southern California, and very specifically, I hate to say entertainment industry, but coming from pioneers of sound engineering, and for me, it was a lot of recording, film and television session work and stage and things like that. So my entire life, I expected to stay there, back and forth to New York and other places. But I was so rooted, and I said, I was in my house for 25 years, and I said, I could never leave here. I'd never leave here. And as things got worse and worse, and I don't have to tell anyone what all that is, it really became very stressful, and people became, I don't want to say all people, but the people yelling at you from across the street outside in the sun because you're not wearing your mask on your walk, and COVID's really kind of put an extra pressure on so many of us to just say, what am I staying here for? I can't work. I can't go to the gym. In the meantime, my dear father had been diagnosed with inoperable cancer, and I was back and forth to Utah, where they moved in 2013, Southwest Utah, St. George, which is just a beautiful place. Unfortunately, the first time I stepped out of the car here, it was 10 o'clock at night in the middle of August, and it was about 100 degrees, and I said, heck no, that's not happening.
Okay.
Can't move here. But that was just a bad start, unfortunately. But I loved the people here. I gradually, over the years, kind of got to know things a little better. And there's just a culture of kindness in general that permeates. Not everyone is LDS or Mormon, depending on your verbiage. But there seems to be, I think it doesn't hurt. It helps a lot that's a big part of the community. And
that reminds me, they did a South Park episode, and actually, and it was, I don't know if you know this, they did a South Park episode, making fun, by the way, of the LDS church. And then they make fun about the hat and all this. They made fun. And at the end, which I thought was really good, at the end, they basically said, yeah, whatever about the hats and the strange things, you really want these people to be your neighbors.
That's it.
Whatever about the hats, doesn't matter. You want these people to be neighbors. I always struck with me, because any Mormons I've ever met, I've always thought, God, I wish I lived next door to them.
That's it. And I don't literally, but it's pervasive. And of course, it's a wide continuum as within any faith. In terms of observance and level of all of those things. But I figure anyone who spends that much time in church thinking about and working on their character, fine by me. And the way that they raise the children are amazing. So anyway, I just back and forth. And then COVID, the shutdown happened. And I was looking back through pictures, and it was just interesting. I was going back and forth for my dad's chemo every 3 weeks. And then I was here. And then I was here, and my sister was stuck here with me in this little casita. But we really grew to get to know the place in the sense of really living here rather than staying for a few days. And that was a huge blessing, because I realized I do love it here. I could love it here. I could really love living here. And I started to view my home when I would go back to my house in Sherman Oaks. I started to feel like it was this lovely stateroom on the Titanic. And I'd put so much money into this stateroom, and my entire life and career was invested in this. And yet it's going to the bottom of the ocean, and the things that I'd see on Nextdoor this is a word I'd never heard as a verb, but someone posting that one of the homeless people had diarrheaed on his gate get into his house, into his condo. And it's like, wow, okay. And he was so mad because it wasn't like an accident. This was like a hostile act. So I was seeing more of that kind of barbarism and just animal behavior and people, just things I never can unsee. Yeah. South of the boulevard, around the boulevard, nice neighborhood. That's it. Put it on the market. And my dear friend Mary helped me sell it like that. It was just an amazing process. And she just was like, I'll do anything to help you get out of here. And they're hopefully leaving soon too. I know you know Mary.
Yeah, exactly. Funny. I was just thinking about her. So that's so much to unpack here, but you're kind of saying in a way, COVID broke you. Kind of COVID really brought everything to a head. It kind of concentrated the stuff that you were already somehow aware of. Am I just not putting words into your mouth?
Absolutely. And it forced me to discover that I could live somewhere else, that I could let go of my house. And was so attached, been in my family for years and all those things. Thank you. And I thought I had much more of an emotional attachment to it than I actually did. I didn't even go visit it when we went back to visit family. I didn't even go see it. It's like, whatever. It's the past. And that pushing to get me here and being close to my family. I wasn't going to be away from my father. I didn't want to get stuck in California away from my father. So I just made the choice and got rid of it. And it was It was just amazing timing and finding a place though. So that first night of it being 100 degrees at 10 o'clock at night, had someone told me that there was a place a half an hour away that was a higher altitude and beautiful and had green and trees and its own aquifer and all of these things, I would have moved a long time ago. So there are places, and my to sort of skip ahead, if I had any thoughts to people or words of caution if they're thinking of moving somewhere, go there at the worst time of year. I know Florida in the spring and winter, lovely. Idaho and Montana in summer, lovely. So that's not the time. You can scout places then, but make sure I would say stay for a month if you can.
At the worst time, yeah.
At the worst time.
I think one of the things that will be a feature when we're doing this particular segment on the podcast is that everywhere except for California has a thing called weather. And, it's what variation on the weather. So you've now been there, Elizabeth, through the seasons, right? You've done a full year.
Oh, yeah. It's been a full year and a half of actually being a legal resident here. And I know I don't have to tell people how if you sell anything in Southern California, the equivalent was I could buy a nicer house here and 4.5 acres of land where I'm going to be building.
So what have you sold in California, you bought a home, and where are you? Tell us geographically. We'll put up a map so that people, because I think I want to do this for the whole country, and I want encourage people to write to us and get in touch if they want to tell their story of how they
Definitely.
escaped. And our idea basically is to do people who've escaped from a blue place. I mean, a lot of people will be from California, but basically any blue place. I've got a friend next week coming on who's going to talk about moving out of Albuquerque, New Mexico to Lubbock, Texas. But, tell us where you are. Let's have a look at the map.
So this is about, if you head out the 15 to Vegas and then keep on going, it's about 100 miles north of Las Vegas, right off the 15.
Okay, so quite close to Vegas then. So you really have Vegas as a kind of that's where you go if you need some music or you want to have a good night out.
Or an international airport. It's, it's not a big deal. We've tried shuttles and things, but it doesn't really make sense. You're going, it's not like you're going through Los Angeles to get to LAX. You're going through, there's a beautiful gorge that you drive through either at the beginning or end of that trip, but it's mostly really open stretches and 2-lane highway, and it's just nice. It's just really nice.
Oh, you just mentioned something that I kind of want to bring attention to, because I know you've sent us some video and we're going to be showing that video right now. So basically describe to us the scenery that's kind of your everyday sort of scenery there.
Well, in St. George, and I'm specifically in Sun River, which is a 55 and older community. I turned 55 the day that the month that my house was listed. So that was, again, huge blessing. The timing of that was like not lost on me, that I could actually buy a house a half a mile from my parents. Because they'd moved into this community. And it's really wonderful. We've got about 3,000 people, I believe, or maybe 3,000 homes. A little fuzzy on the math, but you can make fun of it if you drive around, because you'd say, well, every house looks the same. Yes, it's clean, it's tidy, it's quiet. There isn't the battle of the leaf blowers. If I hear them at all, it's 30 seconds a week. It's all done at once, and it's done.
And on that very point, Elizabeth, I have literally gone next door to say to the leaf blower guy who's been blasting for the last 2 hours, I said to him, do you mind? Could you stop? Because my friend is just I'm just recording an interview with my friend. So actually, that's very funny. So you've got this lovely peace and quiet, and then you've got these kind of quiet. Scenery is magnificent that you sent us.
It is. You know what? It's the sky and the mountains and the geology. This was such a geologically violent place, however many hundreds, I don't know, thousands. I'm not a geologist, but many
Long time
eons.
Ago.
Let's go with eons ago.
We'll go with eons.
Eons. Yeah, there was this was an ocean bed. So and then this disruption and then glaciers. So you have Zion, less than an hour away. You have Snow Canyon, which is much redder than it sounds, but when the snow is on it, it's just, you can understand why people of faith said, oh yeah, no, this is it, when they saw this place. It is so inspiring, so beautiful. It is high desert. So technically it's Mojave Desert. So there is green, there's plenty of green. especially in the older parts of the city. Water is a bit of an issue, so I warn anyone. I don't want to be, it's heaven on earth, but there are real problems like there are going to be with anywhere in the Southwest. So I worry about that as it's growing so quickly. We've got I think it's around 90,000 is the population here now, maybe close to 100,000. And what's interesting, fabulous major medical, and that was part of why it was chosen. So I think this is a great place to share with people because we didn't just happen upon it. It was about 10 years of research by my parents. The topography and the what it looks like once you're up a little bit higher, there's Pine Valley Mountain, which you see in almost every picture I sent to you. It's just something else. So up there, it's cooler, and some people will have little cabins and stay up there in the summer, real pine trees. Pinion Hills is where I'm building, and that's about a half an hour from here, about 20 minutes from town. So, and it's funny because it's 20 minutes from town, and people go, "Oh, that's so far." But it's no one else on the road virtually, and you're looking at the most stunning scenery. Your jaw is just on the floor the whole drive up and back. It's stunning. And the sky, it just feels bigger here.
Yeah.
So very dramatic.
So, and I think this is a good thing to ask people, because I think it's like, what do you miss? Like, what do you miss about California other than the weather? Is there
only
anything?
The people? And honestly, and I don't even really, I thought, I'm 3 generations of milk-fed veal in California, Southern California. I am so softened in terms of weather and so intolerant to the slightest little. You really do get used to it. You really do adjust. And here's the other thing. I know I've heard you talk about the energy costs and fractionation and what a big deal that is when energy, heating, and cooling costs go up. I was paying in Sherman Oaks, gosh, it seemed like $1,500 a month. And I know neighbors who were certainly paying more. I was being uncomfortable a lot of that to do it. Here, I don't even look at it's like $60. It's so much cheaper because, at least for now, things are locally sourced, or however you want to describe it. They're getting it from, I believe, clean coal and other things that are local. So it's so much less expensive. So you can afford to keep your house comfortable. But for weeks, we haven't used anything, heat or air conditioning. And I know it's spring, but it's fine. And then there are people who have their RVs that will go up to Star Valley, where it's cool for the roughest 2 months of the summer. But when you have then a perfect day, as opposed to kind of every day was kind of the same and pretty smoggy, and hopefully you didn't have fire blowing in smoke. And
correct.
I love it. I didn't think I would, and I absolutely love it. I don't even mind when it's hot. I stay inside.
I'm so happy for you. I actually thought that you might have a list of kind of like, because people say things like, I don't know, arugula, or that the local food isn't quite up to the California standards, but you're not even mentioning food or anything like that.
I can't find someone to do a good job on my hair, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist here. So cut my own hair, stopped coloring it. It's like, it's not worth it. I will say though, instead of it being $300 with a tip, it's $60 with a tip.
Oh my God.
So things are so much more affordable here.
And that's a huge thing. I mean, that's a huge thing for people. There's a freedom in that, just because, I mean, obviously I'm calling this section, that, you want to get to somewhere freer. There's a freedom in also having more money in your pocket and not worrying all the time about how you're going to pay for stuff. So that's another reason to love leaving California, where everything, as you say, has gone. I mean, you've mentioned a few of the things about California. You mentioned sort of the homeless. You talked about people shouting across the street during COVID and saying, and we've all experienced that kind of thing. What else about California drove you nuts?
Well, certainly taxes, certainly, unemployment. Even though I had these skills, more and more there became social limitations. And I remember I lost a lot of students during a certain election, not even that one, the one before.
Right.
Just because when people ask me, would you join our effort? And it's like, well, I appreciate you doing that, and good for you, your civic involvement. That's not where my heart is.
Yeah, we can see where your heart is actually in the background there in your picture. I think, am I correct in saying we have a Trump mug in the background there? Is that correct?
We do. It was, and it was my dad's, and my mom just always had it turned around just so other people wouldn't see it. And it was like, you don't have to do that here.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, I did a stand up. I've become a stand up comedian since I last saw you. So basically, one of my last efforts was, and I think you'll find this funny, was I said that I had a great business idea, which was this pack that I would create, and I'm going to become a gazillionaire with this. And it's a pack that you would buy or you would give as a gift to somebody who's leaving California, and it'll be what they need to bring to the next place. And so what they need to do, like the minute they arrive, they have to put out, a Let's Go Brandon flag. And they had to put out like Trump stuff and put out the American flag and all this kind of, and I had this kind of like and it was kind of obviously a joke, but I do think, and I know this from people that are, because one of the things that can happen when you go from a blue state to a red state is that the red state people, the freedom loving people, will be a little scared at first because they think, oh God, she's come from California. They can see your number plates and they're thinking, oh my God, we got a Californian. And their initial reaction to that may not necessarily be good, right?
No, and I got in the habit of outing myself immediately and saying, but don't hold that against me. I won't California your Utah. And now I want to say, don't California my Utah. And of course, we're in danger of that. Salt Lake City has gone in some ways the direction of places like Seattle. Not entirely, but there are problems and things we need to fight for here. Yeah. But I feel like at least there's a fighting chance here. There used to be nowhere great to go buy a nice outfit if you had an event or something to go to. Not that I go to a lot of events, but and then my neighbor across the street up where I'm building opened this cute little dress shop, and it's well, look at that. So there isn't really anything that we're missing. We did find Italian kale, Lucianato.
You see, I knew we'd get to kale eventually.
And I believe that is one of the few things we can credit Californians for, is that the demand was there, and so now we can make our green juice.
Oh my God. Before we finish up, and we're going to finish up in a moment, I just think I'd like everyone who's listening, because I just love what you do, Elizabeth. Would you tell people what it is that you do? Because I think
thank you.
It's amazing.
I love it. I've been singing professionally for my entire adult life, and started teaching very early. My grandmother was my first voice teacher, and as I started getting better and people were asking about that in high school, she said, try to explain what you're doing. It'll be good for you. And by the time I was through with college, which was a kind of a huge waste of time, theater, a scholarship in theater, wow, super useful. So I started, but I was already working in musical theater, and I started taking on students, and it just was my goal to learn as much as I could. And rather than go to the closest teacher, go to the one on another planet for one lesson if it was the best person I could find. So I've gone around the world with the best people I could find. So I love doing that. I love teaching vocal technique. And then I was introduced by my classical voice teacher in New York in 2012 to something called breathing coordination. That is just an amazing thing. I found it to be the missing piece for singing, and also for other things. Very helpful, very effective for breathing issues like emphysema, COPD, things where people think that why they're getting weaker is because of the disease, and it's actually their compensatory habits. And we can teach them how to not do that and to actually have better and better performance in spite of the disease. So we're not curing the disease, but we're helping them with that. And I love being able to share that. That was about 2 years back and forth to Switzerland to get that training and certification and bring it here.
And you also do a sort of a musical therapy, right? So you've also sort of helped people through music, isn't that correct?
I would say that's correct. Well, I produced fundraising concerts and that sort of thing. In terms of, I wouldn't claim music therapy because I know there is specialized training that's just that. But right. I think all music is therapeutic.
Yes.
And if you are doing that, I'm looking over at my massage table when I do a voice lesson or work with someone, and I work with a lot of young people here. So it isn't the world-class singers that I have worked with, but it's really rewarding, and they're doing it because they want to do it and they want to sing hymns and what. Not all, but some want to do musical theater.
Amazing.
So but it's to manage the nervous system and post traumas, all of that. It's so much is related to the breathing, and it's so much easier than what people think and what they tend to find online when they go looking for good breathing.
I got
They
you.
will tend
I
to
got you.
use wrong
I want to put you totally on the spot here, and you can and we can edit this out, and we
Okay.
cannot do this. But would you sing us out? Because you have the most beautiful voice. Is there something you'd share with us? Because you have the most beautiful voice. I just think, I'm looking at you there and I'm thinking, it would be kind of a shame if we didn't get to hear Elizabeth sing. And but if I'm putting you on the spot, you can tell me, to buzz off. But if you had something that you could share with us, that'd be just amazing.
Oh, I thought about whether we might do that. I didn't have something prepared. Well, the one for my father is that there's that one.
Okay, do it. Yeah, do it.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, my God. I'm clapping for everyone that'll be clapping when they hear this and get to see you singing that. It makes me just ask the question, are your parents still with us?
My father passed about a year and a half ago, December 19th, 2020, about a month after I moved here.
But
I wouldn't trade the time for
No.
anything. Regret that I didn't come sooner, but it was, and I had sung that song for him for his birthday. I recorded it in 1999, knowing that it was our distance at the time physically, but knowing that someday it would be this distance. And so it's a special one.
I think we heard that on Magda's here, the two of us, and we both lost our fathers. So really beautiful, and what a I couldn't have been more perfect, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been just amazing. We are so happy that you're happy in your escape to out of California to beautiful, beautiful southern Utah. And
yes,
I really hope we get to go and visit you soon.
I hope so. And can I add one other thought for
Please.
those who are looking for their space?
Yes.
You find the general metropolis, mini metropolis that has their major medical, depending on your age. If you're in your 20s, maybe you're not worried about that. But most of us are in maturing mode. There is probably a hidden gem within a half an hour or 45 minutes of that if you want to also be further away. And the one I chose is where everything's at least an acre. All of those really nice people. If I could send you the next door posts, there are things like 3 horses just ran across the front of our car. Who do these babies belong to? Or some little French poodle found its way into our barn. It's people returning animals, and it's people saying, service opportunity this Saturday, 8:00, show up with your rakes, and we're going to do a yard clearage, your rakes and your smiles. it's that kind of people.
Oh God.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah,
there are little pockets like that, even if it's not the city itself or the immediate suburbs.
It's so interesting. You make an anecdote that I always tell this story. I did a speech one time in Chicago, and they had protests. There were students out, very annoyed about me and all that kind of thing. And it was really hostile. And the college, wherever the college was on Lake Michigan, and the weather was awful, and there was this awful wind, and the whole thing was miserable. And immediately afterwards, I had to get on a plane, and I had a speech in either, I don't know whether I'm looking at Magda, whether it was Southern Carolina or Northern Carolina, but it was one of the Carolinas. And I landed, and I'd never been in the Carolinas before. And I literally thought someone was, playing a prank on me. Like, it was like, I thought there was a camera somewhere, because people were so nice. I thought, like, I was literally looking at them, why are you being so nice to me? And I remember I booked into the hotel, and the guy at the hotel, or the woman at the hotel, said, yeah, you've probably, with the lovely accent and everything, the Southern accent, you've probably come a long way, You know what you'd love? You'd love our, our lounge right now when we're serving coffees or whatever, we're serving afternoon tea, or you should have a cocktail or something. And I remember thinking, I just want to be your friend. I just want to keep in touch. I want your email address. But and the problem was, like, that was my experience with the Uber driver, with the people in the hotel, and everyone was so nice to me. And I thought the contrast, the hostility in Chicago versus this kind of, so it kind of sounds like a similar, and I love that next door thing here, because the next door in where I'm living, and where I am here in Venice.
Oh, yes.
I've given up reading it because it's so hostile. It's so awful. And they talk a lot, these liberals talk a lot about othering. This is one of their things, othering. One of these days, I'm going to put up a post where I'm going to say, yeah, how dare you, because you've othered me forever, with the kind of hostility to having a different opinion about something, for example, like, I don't think we should really kill babies up to 9 months, months. And you think that I'm, and you're calling me the savage. But anyway, I'm going to stop for right now. Elizabeth, this was just gorgeous. And I so appreciate your time. But that song,
thank you, Anne.
You have broken hearts everywhere and opened hearts everywhere. We love you.
We love you too. Thank you for everything you and Phelim are doing. Just you're gonna loving you up like crazy for all of that.
I love it. And you'll love the new thing that we're doing, which we can't talk about just yet.
I can't wait.
Yeah. All right. God bless. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Well, wasn't that amazing? I'm so glad at the end it was kind of like an afterthought, because I'm kind of looking at her there, and you probably were looking at her on screen, anyone who's watching on YouTube, and you could see the piano in the background, and I was kind of looking at the piano and thinking, God, I really need to ask her to sing, because I know she has this extraordinary voice. And my God, her choice to sing that song, which obviously means so much to her, and I think means so much to so many of us. What a powerful, powerful song. What a little gift we're giving you. So you didn't get a recipe, but we have given you the gift of the beautiful, beautiful singing of our friend Elizabeth Prescott. So that's basically it from us. If any of you would like to maybe, get in touch with us, by the way, if you've moved from a blue place to a red place. I think next week we're hoping to have our friend, anyway, I won't say just in case she can't do it, but we have a friend that left Albuquerque and went to Texas, went to Lubbock, and maybe we'll have her on next week to tell about their experience, their family experience. And I know she's been writing to us, and she's a dear friend of this podcast, and she's loving being in Lubbock. So if you have a story, please let us know about that. And thank you so much. And as I said, I won't be on my own next time. So we'll be welcoming Phelim back and wishing him a happy birthday and all of that. So thanks so much for tuning in. Bye.